Now, on page 274, second line from the top. Second line from the top. Yaakov says like this to Yosef. He gives the brachas, and then on 274, two lines from the top, it says, "Vayomer Yisrael el Yosef." Yisrael says to Yosef, "Hinei anochi meis, I'm going to die. V'hoya elokim imochem, God will be with you. V'yeshivaschem el eretz avosechem. God will eventually return you from the exile in Egypt to the land of your forefathers." 274, 4 lines from the top. And then he says something very strange. We need to understand this Rashi here. Vanina sati lachem shchem echad. I have given you one shchem achad al achecha. I have given you, meaning referring to the city of Shechem, asher lakachti miyad ha'amori b'charbi uvekashti, which I have taken from the Amori with my sword and with my bow and arrow. Now, Rashi here says, what is it? When we never find the Torah describe that he took Shechem, that Yaakov Avinu took Shechem from the Amori with his, we never find the fight, so Rashi fills in the second left column. Rashi says 3 lines from the top, left column, Becharbi ubekashti. Rashi says, Hi chochmasi utfilasi, my wisdom and my tefillah, that I took it from the Amori with my wisdom and my tefillah. So if you look in Targum Onkelos, which is on the side, I'll just give you an Aramaic, quick Aramaic lesson here. He says it's in Pasuk Chaf Beis in Onkelos. In Onkelos, it's 5 lines from the top. 5 lines from the top. Chaf Beis. Va'ano Yehavi Sloch, I have given you chulak chad, 1 portion, yatir al achach, more than your brothers. Dinasevis midad Amorah, which I took from the Amoris, bitzlosi ubevousi, through my prayers. 2 different forms of prayers. Okay? So the Torah refers to it as weapons. Weapons as a sword and a bow and arrow. And Yaakov refers to the sword and the bow and arrow as through my prayer. So the commentaries, many commentaries that go into this, that there are 2 types of prayer. There's one prayer which is called sword, and there's one prayer which is called bow and arrow. Now, one of the explanations is like this: when you daven, there are 2 types. There's a standard liturgy which the Anshe Knesset Agdola formulated for us, the men of the Great Assembly. What you say, the regular siddur that you say in the morning, and then there's your own personal petitions. So when it comes to the standard liturgy, when they compiled it, we say it every day. And it's a remarkable thing about tefillah that we could say the same tefillahs every day, and when you have kavanah, you never get tired of saying it. Theoretically, you read something enough times, you should get tired of it. But since they formulated it in a way that we won't get tired of, if people get tired of it, it's not because they're tired of it, they just don't feel like davening at all. In other words, davening is a very challenging thing. Davening is much more challenging than learning. You got to put something into davening. If you put something into davening is like beer. You got to develop a taste for it. And when you do, you get a high. But you got to develop the taste. If you break through in davening, you won't ever find the davening boring, or at least on a good day, you won't find it boring no matter how many times you've said it. And if you haven't developed a taste for davening, then you're always going to find it boring. It's a question of developing a taste, not like, I'm bored of these prayers. Say the prayers over and over again. We say it every day, but if you think about it, it becomes a new prayer every day. So there are 2 types of prayers. The one that the Anshe Knesset Hagdola formulated is like a sword. The sword is sharp, and theoretically, all you got to do is touch the sword, you can get cut. Even if you put very little pressure, you can get cut. That means that if you daven, even if your head isn't completely there, just saying the words of davening, there's a potency, there's an effect from the davening. Just saying the words carries a potency with it. But that's when it's a davening that's been formulated by the men of the Great Assembly. If you go and say your own personal petition, please Hashem, give me parnasa, and you're miles and miles away, that has no effect. That's like an arrow. It's like a bow and arrow. An arrow is only as strong as the force put behind it. So if you put an arrow, you don't cut yourself with arrows. They have a kind of a dull tip. Very often the tip of the arrow is not razor sharp like a sword is razor sharp. So the tip of the arrow's penetration ability is to the degree that you put the force behind it. I don't know if you've ever arched. You ever shot a bow and arrow? So yeah, I'll take you on anytime, Eliasef. But the what do you call it? The
standing in front of the
yeah, right. That's probably if I'm shooting, it's probably the safest place for you to be standing. So the bow and arrow, an arrow is only as strong as the force you put behind it. That's your personal petition. So there are two types of davening. That's what's being described here. There's davening, which is a sword, and there's davening, which is the bow and arrow. And if you want to have an effect, a sword is sharp. The more the more force you put behind the sword, obviously it's going to cut. But even the very little force it'll cut will have an effect, because the men of the Great Assembly, through their Ruach HaKodesh, they formulated the tefillah in such a way that the tefillah has an effect. A bow and arrow, which is your own tefillah, you have to put force behind it. You have to put force behind it. There's a very interesting story about the guy. The king challenges the champion archer to an arching contest. And the champion archer is in a predicament over it, because on one hand, he wants to maintain his reputation as the champion archer. Right? On the other hand, when you go golfing with the boss, you got to let the boss win. This is the king. So what are you going to do? So the king shoots, and he hits close to the bullseye. The archer shoots, and he's way on the outside. And King smirking. King shoots again, and again he hits close to the bullseye. The archer shoots, and he misses way on the outside again, but he splits right through his original arrow. He splits right down through his original arrow. And the king shoots again, and again he's close to the archer shoots again, and he splits that arrow again right down the middle. Right? So by the end of the contest, the king won. The king scored more points, but everybody sees who's the better archer. And the archer is the guy who could split his own arrow right down the middle time after time. So he's maintained his reputation, but you got to let the boss win. Right? So it's like it's like golfing with the boss, where you land a foot from the hole, then you just smack it as hard as you can right into a sand trap where everybody sees exactly what's going on. Okay, the boss won, right? But everybody saw who's the better golfer. So that is the first idea. The second idea here is that you should wonder if this is a description of war. In the old days, war was much more personal. There's much more job satisfaction in war in the old days. You went out to the battlefield with clubs and with swords, chopped off a few limbs. There was some, at least you could hear the clang of the thing. I always liked that spike. There was always that spike, that those guys held. You could hear the clang of the spike against somebody's head. There's some jobs I hear. What is it nowadays? You get in the back room, you hit a couple of buttons, and you take out a city. There's very little job satisfaction. You're playing, a little bit of something. So in the old days, war was very personal. Now, if you fought a war in the old days, which weapon is used first, a sword or a bow and arrow?
Bow and arrow.
Of course. The archers shoot. I always remember watching those war pictures, the Romans against the barbarians, whatever it is. I was thinking to myself, I definitely would have wanted to have been an archer. Because an archer, you're up on that thing, you're pretty protected, and you just kind of shoot anyone you want. And if there's a guy on your side who you don't like because he wants to go out with the same girl you do, you just nail him in the back also, go prove it. They didn't have war investigation committees from the United Nations in those days. Just shoot, put a flame on it. Oh, sorry, Antonio. Boom. Watch Antonio go running around. Okay, it's much more fun. It's much safer to be an archer. Shoot an arrow up, down if you're bored. Try a long one. A sword. Then after you're shooting, the enemy gets closer. Then the bows and arrows, you can't shoot bow and arrows short distance. Then you start pulling out the sword and poking people, right? So Yaakov says, I started with my sword and then my arrow. What does that mean? What does that mean? A sword? Why should the sword come before the arrow? That doesn't happen. You don't fight the enemy up close and then back off and start shooting bows and arrows. It doesn't make any sense. So there's one battle that does happen. You know where that battle is? Correct. The battle with the Yetzer Hara. Because the job with the Yetzer Hara is first, he's the enemy who's with us from the moment we wake up in the morning. As soon as the alarm clock goes off, he gets up for nates every morning. The Yetzer Hara is up early, and he's there right alongside our bed every morning to help us push the snooze button. Right? So the first battle with the Yetzer Hara, the first thing is pull out your sword. Distance him from you. Then, once he's distanced, our job is to keep him at a distance. Yaakov's talking here about the battle with the Yetzer Hara. B'charbi ubekashti. Charbi ubekashti means that in the battle with the evil inclination, you got to first. He starts off immediately with trench warfare. After the trench warfare, You push him away. Now he's at a distance. Now start shooting him, which represents the various fences that we make to keep him far away. Keep him far away. Don't get into the fight up close. If it's hand-to-hand combat up close, chances are you're going to lose. The goal is to avoid the hand-to-hand combat by keeping him at a distance as much as possible. That applies in many areas of Yiddishkeit. Okay, now, Yaakov then calls his son, and he's going to give them a bracha. Somebody told me that in World War I, when the English and the Germans were in the trench, the French and the Germans were in the trenches. You know, they're getting slaughtered over 100 yards of real estate in a war that nobody knows why they're fighting. And apparently on Christmas, is this true? On Christmas, apparently they called a truce. There was an official truce on Christmas. They came out of the trenches. I think they even played a football match or something. They what do you call it? Then at a certain point, the French probably lost to the Germans, I imagine. And at a certain point, okay, back to war. Then you go back into the trenches and start shooting the people that you were just playing for. Apparently they go, they're talking to each other. Hi, Jacques. I'm going to nail you between the eyes right when you get back in the trenches. Hey, merci. You just see the conversation. And then he goes into the trenches. It's an amazing thing. They call timeout. They call timeout for it's almost like mothers and daughters fighting. I ever watch mothers and daughters fight? It's one of the most amazing things in the world. They'll start yelling. I've seen this over and over in my house. Mother buys her daughter a sweater. Mommy, I hate green, and I'm never going to wear green, and I hate you, and you don't know anything. Blah, 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 blah. You love green. They start getting into a fight. The mother says, but you wore green at cousin Shimmy's bar mitzvah. Says, when? He goes, remember when they had potato kugel, and was that with the pink napkins? Yeah, remember we saw cousin Sheila there? It's like they take time out to reminisce. They reminisce a little bit. The next thing you know, back, but mommy, I hate green, and I hate you, and I'm not going to wear it. Even if Mashiach comes, I won't wear it. Even if Mashiach comes, they get into one of these messianic arguments, about the daughter because of the daughter's sweater. So that is the battle. That's trench warfare. When the Yetzer Hara starts a trench warfare. Then you push them off, then you keep them distant. Okay. Pasuk Aleph says like this. Vayikra Yaakov al Banov. Yaakov calls his sons. Vayomer he'asu v'gilchem asher sheikra chazam b'achu yisayamim. Yaakov calls the brothers, and he wants to reveal what's going to happen at the end of days. In other words, Yaakov is about to reveal when Mashiach is going to come. And then Rashi says he lost it. Ve'agida lechem. It's a left column, fourth line. Bikesh legalos es haketz. Yaakov wanted to reveal prophetically when the end of days is going to be. V'nistalka mimenu shchina. The shchina left him. V'hischol omer dvarim acheriv. And he started saying other things. So there are different opinions among the commentators. The other things I said are going to be the brachas that he gives to his sons now. So different opinions among the commentators. Why did the shchina leave him? I mean, Yaakov wanted to say it, and for some reason, God apparently said, no, I don't want them to know. Why?
Some things are just not meant to be known to us.
Yeah, that's true, but the question is why? Why shouldn't we know it? What would it hurt to know it? What would it hurt to know it, and why shouldn't Yaakov tell? So one opinion is, well, there's a practical thing here. Yaakov begins to tell them the course of Jewish history, and as Yaakov mentions Jewish history, he sees all sorts of sad calamities happening, the Crusades and the Holocaust, so all sorts of things are happening. And when you start talking about something like that, you could easily fall into a state of despondency. Ruach HaKodesh only rests on somebody if he's in a state of simcha. So just practically, as Yaakov's talking about it, all of a sudden, then there's going to be, what was I saying? What was I saying? Where'd that go? Because just practically, he lost it because it doesn't say God took away. It says the Shekhinah left him. Sure, the Shekhinah left him. Once you're talking about women getting what do you call it by the Cossacks and what the Cossacks did to women, and you're describing it. Yaakov's go through all the history, so eventually you may become sad. Number one.
Also, another thing I was just thinking of, if he mentioned the time of Mashiach coming, we wouldn't daven for him to come.
Excellent. That's the second reason. Very good. The second reason is the goal of a Jew is not to get to Mashiach. The goal of a Jew is to serve God. If you know Mashiach is coming on a certain date, and you're being chased by Babylonians, and it's like, oh, please Hashem, save us, bring Mashiach, that sort of thing. I mean, the whole Jewish history, a part of our faith is the belief that he could come every day, davening for him every day, and serving God with all of our hearts. If you know Mashiach is coming next week, Well, Mashiach's coming anyway. Let's go up. Let's go. Let's go to the beach. We never got nothing to worry about. You don't have to daven for him because Mashiach's on the way. So let's get a good dip before he comes. Because after he comes, he's going to make us go to the Arimik in Sfas where it's cold. So let's get our let's get which I doubt, by the way. So let's get in our. So therefore, it's not in our best interest to know it. It's not in your best interest to know when it's going to be because it will decrease our devotion instead of increase our devotion. That could often happen. Now, he says like this. He kavtzu v'shimu b'nei Yaakov v'shimu Yisrael avichem. Join together and listen to Yisrael, your father. And the commentaries say join together is a prerequisite for any bracha. The Jewish people, bracha only rests on the Jewish people when we're united, when we are at peace with each other, when there is unity among the Jewish people. That's when the bracha rests. Now, watch this fascinating idea here. Ruvain bechoriata, you are my firstborn. Kochi vereshis oni, you are my first seed. Yeser se'es v'yeser az. Foremost, art scroll, and we're going to have to look at the art scroll because some of these words are pretty obscure. Foremost, they're almost poetic. Foremost in rank and foremost in power. So Ruvain, you're the firstborn. You're my first. You're my first produce. And by rights, you are entitled to all sorts of things. What was Reuven entitled to? The Bechorah,
Double the portion.
which is the Bechor, the Kahuna, and the Malchus, royalty. However, Pachaz Kamayim, you were impetuous like water. Oh, good, water like impetuosity. You were impetuous like water. Altosar, therefore you are not going to have an advantage over any of the others. Ki alisa mishkeve avicha. Because you mounted your father's bed. In other words, he moved Yaakov's bed around. Az chilalta yitzui Allah. Then you desecrated him who ascended on my couch. There's a chil Hashem. You got involved in my stuff. There's a chil Hashem. So Yaakov says, really, Reuven, you deserve to be the head, the Bechor, the Kahuna, and the Malchus. You lost all of them. You know where you lost? The Bechor goes to Yosef. He gets the double tribes. Ephraim and Menashe both become official tribes, replacing Yosef. So Yosef goes from 1 to 2. Yosef, we never talk about Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Yosef. We never talk about Yosef as far as the poor. We talk about Ephraim and Menashe. They get the portion in the land. There is no Shevet Yosef in the land. Yosef is divided into 2. That's the double portion for the firstborn. Kohen, Kahuna, comes from Shevet Levi. And Malchus comes from Shevet Yehuda, all of which were supposed to come from Reuven. So the question becomes, what was it that Reuven, Yaakov says, well, you're impetuous like water. So first of all, I understand what impetuous is. But if I would say somebody's impetuous, I would say you are impetuous like a rhinoceros in pain. Because a rhinoceros who is in pain becomes very impetuous. Right? I would say you are impetuous like somebody has just lost all his money on the stock market, or he's panicked because the banks are closing and there's a depression, there's like a market crash. That's somebody who's impetuous. What does it mean to be impetuous like water? What does it mean to be impetuous? So in our day and age, we've seen tsunamis, and a tsunami comes, and the water just all of a sudden flows in. That big tsunami that they had 10 years ago, where was in Indonesia, killed 280,000 people.
Is it unpredictable?
It's unpredictable, and the only ones who really knew about the tsunami, they claim, are the animals. The animals have a sense. They also said the animals were moving inland. The animals have a sense of the thing, but nobody else had it. I once saw a clip on the. My dad showed me a clip of that tsunami. They have the film, and the water all of a sudden out of the clip. I was like, see this tidal wave coming, and then the water just keeps coming and washing everything away. It's very frightening. So he says you're impetuous like water. So that at the plain meaning seems to be what it means. It's like if you break a dam, if the dam breaks, the water just all of a sudden it just flows. So Reuven behaved in a certain way without restraint and without a whole lot of forethought. He saw something and he reacted. So the commentaries say that's certainly the criticism, but let's understand in a second what that means. If you put water into a utensil, the water is shaped by whatever shape the utensil is, that's the shape the water is going to take. Right? You put it into a round utensil, you put it into a rectangular utensil, it'll be the shape of a rectangle. It doesn't matter what you put it into. Emotional response comes because you are shaped by external circumstances. You're shaped by it. You're not doing the shaping. Something happens to you. A guy cuts you off in traffic. You reach your hand into the glove compartment and you shoot him. That was not a rational response. Daniel, I don't know if that look means he's right for doing so, or that look means really? You're from Texas, well there, in Texas you shoot people if they walk past you without saying good morning, Hey stranger, yeah, you didn't tip your cap. So in LA, 1 year in LA, they had 40 shootings on the highways from road rage. So not 40 killings, but 40 shootings. That's not well thought out. Hey, chill out, brother. So now I'm chilled. That's not thought out. You are being shaped. So the impetuosity, the comparison to water is Ruvain. You're emotional like water. You're emotional like water. And therefore, since you're emotional like water, then you are going to lose those positions that require control over emotion. Now realize this is not a punishment. It's not a punishment. It is an inherent disqualification. If you say to me, you'd like to be an airline pilot, you only have one problem. You're an alcoholic. And you're going to be drinking up in the air also. Right? You can't be a pilot. You can't be a pilot. I'm not punishing you. It just, most people on the plane would not be happy to hear that. Right? And the airlines could be sued. You're not qualified. You can't have a pilot who's drunk. I would like to be I'd like to be a writer for a newspaper. The only thing is I have no writing skills whatsoever. Sorry, we're not punishing you. We're not punishing you. You're just not qualified. I'd like to be an investor, but I don't know the first thing about money. Okay, so you will make the head of the treasury in Israel. Okay, that works. Then you've got all the qualifications necessary. In Israel, that's all you need. But we're not punishing you. You're just not qualified. You're simply not qualified. Yaakov is saying to Reuven, you want to be a king? The king has to be. Can you imagine? Can you imagine a president of the United States getting upset? He reads the ratings. He gets upset because he's got a 25% disapproval rate, but then he says, give me that black box, will you? Just give me that black box. You can't be shaped by circumstances. You got to control your emotions. You're simply not qualified. Not that you're being punished. You understand the difference. Now, what's unbelievable here is, what is the opposite of a bechor in Hebrew? You know what the word is for a non-bechor? You know the non-bechor the Gemara refers to him? You have the bechor who gets a double portion. Then you have the portion for the regular brothers. A regular brother called a pashut. He's an ordinary. He's a pashut. What is the difference between a king, somebody who's a king? You know what a non-king is? And it's even a lowly in Nach. It talks about somebody who could be either a king or a low, even less than a commoner. He's going to be what's called a choshuch. Could be a king or he could be what's called a choshuch. Choshuch means literally a dark one. But it means a non-king. What's a non-Kohen called? Anybody know what a non-Kohen is called? He's called a Yisrael, but he could be a Levi also. But when the Torah says only a Kohen could approach the Mizbeach, but not a Zar. A Zar means literally a stranger. A non-Kohen is called a Zar. The Zar HaKorev Yumas. Any non-Kohen who approaches dies. So if you take the words, if you're not a Bechor, and you're not a king, and you're not a Kohen, so then it starts with a pei, you're a Pashut, a Choshuch, and a Zar, which spells pei, ches, zayin, right? Because that's what you lost. Take a look at the word in the Torah. Look at the first word in the sentence. Pachaz kamayim. That's what you're going to become because you behave like water. You're going to be a Pashut, a Choshuch, and a Zar. Pachaz stands for Pashut, Choshuch, and Zar. Because you behave like water. You're impetuous like water, and therefore you lose it. Okay?
Pachaz is impetuous?
Pachaz is impetuous, and stands for the things that you are now going to become, which you have forfeited the rights to, and therefore you become the opposite of them. Become a Pashut, a Choshuch, and a Zar. Okay? Shimon v'Levi achim, klei chamos mecheroseim. Shimon and Levi are brothers, and they,
I mean, he's giving him brachas. It doesn't sound like a bracha.
Good, we're going to see that by Shimon and Levi, by Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, he doesn't really give them a bracha, he gives them more of a Musar Shmos. Give them more of a Musar Shmos, and then Yehuda, when it comes time for Yehuda's bracha, Yehuda backs away. Yehuda backs away and says, whoa, I just saw what happened here. I'm not interested in getting a getoig over here. I thought we were getting a bracha over here. And he calls Yehuda closer, and Yehuda gives him the bracha to be the king. But Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, exactly, tells them what their essence is. So he says, Shimon v'Levi achim klei chamas mecheroseim. Shimon and Levi are brothers. and their tool is a tool of violence. Besodam al tovo nafshi b'kolam al techad kivodi ki be'apam hakru ish hargu ish uvirtzonam ikru shor. They, with their wrath, they killed a man, referring to the city of Shechem. Uvirtzonam ikru shor, they uprooted the ox, which is Yosef. Yosef is compared to the ox. And therefore, orur apam ki oz, I curse their anger. He doesn't curse them, he curses their anger. Ve'evrosam ki koshasa, and their wrath, because it's very harsh. Achalkeim b'Yisrael v'afitzim, achalkeim b'Yakov v'afitzim, I will scatter them among the Jewish people. Reuven and Shimon also show a lack, Shimon and Levi also show a lack of control. Same thing as Reuven, only in a different manifestation. They respond. You can't have, we're not punishing you. But what you're doing shows a disqualification. And therefore Yaakov says, I curse their anger, and I'm going to spread them among the Jewish people. So Rashi says, Shimon, from the tribe of Shimon, are going to be the scribes and the teachers of children. And you got to go around getting hired as a malamed, which is how it used to be in Klal Yisrael. A malamed used to come to the kiddo. He's a doctor used to make house visits. Mr. Fogel, you probably still remember that, right? Doctor, you call him doctor to your house. You know, nowadays and age, you're lucky if you go to the doctor and he'll see you. You know, I still remember growing up, my parents calling the doctor would come to the house. You know, and the doctor made house calls. Nowadays, the doctor takes your money. So you're lucky to get out alive. So he says, I'll scatter them among the Jewish people, and here and so they should be separated. And Levi, take a look at Rashi. It's the left column, about 12 lines from the top. Unbelievable. Achalke b'Yakov, left column, 12 lines from the top. Afridem, you see where that is? Left column, 12 lines from the top. Afridem, the main part is the 12th. Afridem zeh, I will separate them from each other. Shelo yehi Levi b'minyan hashvatim. Levi shouldn't be counted with the shvatim. V'arehim chalukah, they'll be divided up. The two of them together are trouble. They even use it in the vernacular when you find two kids who are mischievous in a classroom or two friends who are mischievous. People say, that's a real Shimon and Levi over there. You know, watch those two. There's a Shimon and Levi. That's in the vernacular. That's how they talk about it. Davar acher. Ein lecha, there's another pshat, Rashi says. Ein lecha aniyim v'sofrim u'melamdei tinokos elam mishimon. The poor, the scribes and the teachers come from Shimon. Kidei sheyu nefutzim, so that they should be scattered around. V'shivto shel Levi. What did happen? And what about Shevet Levi? Asa'o mechazer al agronos. He goes around to the granaries, l'trumos u'lemaisros, to get truma and meiser. That means when you separate truma, you give it to the Kohanim, right? When you separate meiser, you give it to the Levi. The Levi's got to get in good with you, because you could give it to any Kohen or Levi you want. So, for example, if Mirza Hashem Mashiach will come soon, and you guys will be separating trumas and meisers, so just remember what a friendly Gemara teacher you had who's a Kohen, and then you might want to give him the trumos, and then and then we'll hit up a few Leviim also. We'll find somebody who's a good Levi. But the Kohanim have to be good with the people, and otherwise, why should I give it to you? You're the guy who's always sitting in my seat in shul. I'll give it to the other Kohen. Why give it to you? So the Kohanim have to watch their step. Shimon wants to be hired as a teacher. You're a professional tutor, and you hire yourself out. Well, people who are hiring people out and people who are giving away trubas and ma'is, who do you give it to? You give it to people who are sweet and diplomatic. I'm not interested. A teacher, first of all, it says lo hakapdan milamed. It says in Pirkei Avos, an impatient person cannot be a teacher. Not kaplan, kapdan. Lo hakapdan milamed. There's one letter difference. It says lo hakapdan milamed. A kapdan, which means kaplan. The word kaplan means it's like a Russian word that means outstandingly good looking. The kapdan is somebody. Why are you laughing? Why are you laughing? It actually means, I'm on film, so I got to tell the truth. It actually Kaplan apparently comes from the Russia, it's related to the word chaplain, because a Kaplan is often a Kohen. Kohanim are like the chaplains. They're seen. The tribe is seen as the tribe of Torah teachers. That's what their role was. So apparently, it comes from the word chaplain. Kagan, the word K, Rabbi, the Chafetz Chaim, who was a Kohen, his last name was Kagan. But the G in Russian is a silent G. So the Kagan, we pronounce it Kagan because it's got a G in it. There's a Jewish name, Kagan. But in Russia, it's a silent, so it really comes out to Kayan, because the Chafetz Chaim was a Kohen. So what we call Kohen in America, what we call Kohen, is actually, what do you call it? Is actually, Kagan and Kohen is basically the same name. So Kaplan with a K is generally a Kohen. Kaplan with a C is often not a Kohen. There was the guy who pitched for the Mets named David Cohn, C-O-N-E, who was not Jewish and he was not a Kohen. And the owner of the Mets asked him to change his name to Cohen, and he declined. He declined. Do you remember Vida Blue?
Yep.
Vida Blue. So Charles Finley, who was the owner of the Oakland A's, asked Vida Blue to change his first name legally to True. To Charles O. Finley, asked him to change it to True so it would have a ring. He'd be True Blue. So he said, well, I'll do it if you change your name to True O. Finley. Right? So that never happened either. I have a friend who actually legally made his middle name The. Because we used to call him, we used to call him whatever his name was. We call like Chaim the Levin. We called him The as a nickname, and he actually changed it. He actually legally had his middle name changed to The. Right? That's actually his name. So he's the one we don't talk about either. But what do you call it? This is the guy who did a somersault when I went with him to Florida. We were walking through a hotel lobby, and he just did right in the middle of the lobby, he just did a karate somersault. Right in the middle of the hotel lobby, he took no prisoners. So what do you call it? Like one of those, but he did a karate one. So if you're going to be hired out, you got to be diplomatic, which means you got to control your anger. To qualify as a teacher, you have to control your impatience and your anger, and to get people to hire you. So Yaakov gives them exactly the things that are going to help them to overcome this challenge. The challenge is the challenge of, I got a nature, I tend to get angry. Okay, you know what? I'm going to give you a job where now you're going to have no choice but to control. Sometimes people, by the way, say, I couldn't help, she got me so angry. She didn't get you angry. She didn't get you. You got angry. And I'll prove it to you. Because the next instant, you could turn very nice. If all of a sudden there's a knock at the door, and your boss is standing at the door and says, oh, by the way, I forgot, I wanted to speak to you about the promotion. Sorry, I didn't catch you in the office. I wanted to speak to you. You could have been yelling at your wife, and the next minute, all of a sudden, there's a phone call. Hello, you're all of a sudden you're sweet as sugar. So it's not that she got you; it's that you didn't control. Anger is an urge, and like any other urge, anger needs to and can be controlled. That's the rule with anger. That's what Yaakov gives them.